And we're live. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Matt. Afternoon.
All right. It looks like everybody's filing in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a good group joining us today. So excited to talk to everybody. I'll go ahead and kick this off. As you can see from the screen, we're here today to talk about real world stories, tongue twister there, of DR planning and cyber resiliency, what works, what doesn't, and the lessons learned. So we'll jump in. Jeff, if you hit the next slide. I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Matt Kramer. I'm the Vice President of Channel and Alliances here at Recovery Point. But the star today is Jeff Judy. He'll be our lead presenter in a wealth of knowledge in the resiliency space. So Jeff has more than 2 decades of experience in system architecture and administration with a particular focus on virtualized solutions. He designed, built, and deployed Recovery Point's cloud environments and has an extensive experience with a broad range of replication and backup technologies. Prior to Recovery Point, Jeff held a number of senior positions with the Fortune 500 integrator in various global consulting firms. He's also has experience deploying new data centers and leading system engineering teams. So Jeff, quite the resume you've built up over the years.
Thanks, Matt.
Hopefully it doesn't make any more gray hairs when you hear that intro here. So
Appreciate it.
Let's go ahead.
I appreciate it, Matt.
Yep. Next slide. We can see the agenda here. We plan on about 45 minutes worth of content. We'll leave some time for discussion and questions at the end of the presentation. We want to hear from you, so please send the questions in. If we can stop and answer them, we will. Most importantly, we want to share what we know works and what often causes organizations to fail in the event of a disaster or a recovery. Let's face it, if you look at the industry, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations that use the term DRAS on their websites in reference to either a managed service or a hosted capability. At Recovery Point, resiliency is what we do. We're in business to protect your organization's performance. And as we go through this today, I think you'll see that there are tremendous differentiators in the DRAS space. It's somewhat an omnibus term now, similar to what cloud has turned into over the years. But we have a very specific go-to-market with DR as a service, and excited to talk about it. So next slide. So as you can see, Recovery Point, we consider ourselves a true end-to-end recovery and continuity hosted solutions provider. Our goal is to protect your business. We are differentiated from many DR service providers due to our security posture. Obviously, on the right, you can see we follow the NIST 800.53 framework. We're unique in that we can support large, complex, heterogeneous environments. With the IBM Power AIX, IBM I, mainframe, x86 combined environments. We're also one of the few providers that has an automated server and application recovery platform we call BPR, or Business Process Resiliency. Most importantly to us is our customer feedback, right? And we're very proud of our Net Promoter Score of 86 plus. And the last part I'll hit on this slide is that banner at the bottom, which is, of course, Gartner. Several other organizations over the years have given us accolades, but most prevalent and consistent over the last 7 years, Gartner has either had us in the quadrant, and for DRAS in particular, they moved away from the quadrant in, I think, 20 or 21. And if you click to the next slide, Jeff, you can see that just remove Recovery Point from the conversation, and let's just look at the industry findings. So it was higher than I thought, but if we look at that first bullet point on the left-hand side, 72% of organizations are poorly positioned in the terms of disaster recovery, with 63 likely suffering from mirages of overconfidence. So I think the 72%, I was surprised that was higher than I expected, but consistent with what you find if you were to do a Google search. But when you add in that 63% suffer from mirages of overconfidence, I think Jeff's going to be able to speak to that and his experience with different organizations as he finds out that, hey, we thought we had everything checked off. We thought that, our test had gone well in the past, so we didn't necessarily need to do one every single quarter. or we just thought that we'd never be actually hit with a disaster, have to declare an emergency. On the right-hand side, we're very proud that in the top quadrant of the market guide, there's an evolved traditional DR providers, and Gartner has us ranked, as you can see, up there with a couple of close competitors for us. SunGard has obviously now moved to 1111 through acquisition, but we're very proud of our 40-year history and what we do for our clients. So next slide. So we have a poll. You guys can't click on the screen, obviously, but if you click on the bottom right, you can see the poll numbers there. If you could take a minute, read that question over the course of your career, how many DR tests have you participated in, and check which one best applies to you. Less than 10, less than 50, less than 100, or 100 plus. Okay, so it looks like 12 votes are coming in now. Everybody can see them changing. Give it another minute. I don't think we have everybody participating, but we have a number of you. So there we go. Somewhat what we expected. Jeff and I presented to a pretty large audience at DRJ. And we found that they were similar. We had one person in the room that could go toe-to-toe with Jeff. But I guess point being is that testing isn't something that people do every single day. In their career, oftentimes people that are tied to the resiliency space have been involved in minimal tests. And if you worked in an organization for 10 years and you did 4 tests a year, you'd still be under the 50 test mark, right? Jeff Judy, on the other hand, is in a unique position, and his time with Recovery Point over the last 10 plus years alone, Jeff has been involved in over 500 either events, disaster recovery events, whether it's cyber or, just an air or a natural disaster and testing. So that's kind of my segue into giving Jeff some kudos into what he's seen. Hopefully we have some good stories about some of the successful times and some of the times that are probably now funny looking back, but not so funny when they were going through a 3-week-long test or something to that effect, and why that happens. So Jeff, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And thanks everyone for participating in the poll. So some of these gray hairs are from just supporting DR tests over the past 10 plus years. I've definitely seen a number of scenarios. So I've just tried to, convey some knowledge and, provide you with information on good strategies for disaster recovery planning. So I like to start here with disaster recovery business expectations and not meeting disaster recovery IT capabilities. And why would I bother starting there? And that's really just it's a foundational component to where you would start. If you went to your CIO or an application owner and you said, how long can we be down, or how much data can you afford to lose? The answer is typically, well, I can't lose any data, and we can never be down. And you as an IT professional would say, or you as an IT professional would know that the capabilities I have don't meet those expectations. And that's what we call the elephant in the room. And this might be the only time you see a stuffed elephant, but I just was looking for an elephant, and my kid just happened to have a stuffed elephant in his room. But that's real. That you have to address that. If you don't address that situation, then it becomes very critical down the road. A classic example would be something like a backup admin. And if you've ever been a backup admin, you know that when there's a time when somebody comes to you in a critical situation and say, hey, we need to recover this system, excuse me. And it's at that point that you discover that you weren't backing it up, or in today's world, maybe, in the cybersecurity realm, you have your SecOps team has changed technologies. They've changed vendors for their syslogging or SIM monitoring capabilities, but the operations team failed to or didn't even know to update the logging environment. So, you go to do some forensics analysis and you discover that the logs are empty. Those are the kind of things where expectations need to line up, and when they don't, you hope that they match up, but then they often don't. So we'll talk about why DR tests fail for a minute. And I know I've been here in this exact position, sleeping on the data center floor. This is not where you want to be. You certainly don't want to repeat that. So why did DR tests fail? In my experience, it's some things we call out here. There's no documentation. There's no organization. You have no good plan in place. You don't have application tiering assignments. Your subject matter experts are unavailable, or you don't have the actual documentation. You've lost the passwords. And the last one there is client teams. They're a disaster in their own right. It's really client teams are not communicating well together in between platforms and dependencies. It just builds frustration, and you end up sleeping on the data center floor there. So just to call out Uptime Institute, you could search these facts as well, but over 60% of failures result in at least $100,000 worth of total losses. And 1 in 5 organizations experience a serious outage. That can involve financial loss, your reputation's damaged, or compliance breaches, and you might have fines brought against you. But on the flip side, if you want to talk, why do, this is where expectations don't meet reality. But on the flip side, when I've seen a test go very well, it's really because it's just the exact opposite. You have business critical applications and goals are identified. You have a good DR plan in place. You have frequent testing to allow you to discover the gaps in your knowledge. And then, of course, you apply automation on top of your testing cycles, which will greatly enhance the benefits to the DR plan. And then, hopefully you have time back with your family or just sitting on a hammock at the beach. So just to share a cautionary tale, we just added a joke here, a little humor. I think, we may need to update our disaster recovery plan. This one suggests that we all run around in circles shouting, what do we do? What do we do? That is real. It's joking aside. If you don't have a good plan in place, when an event occurs, that really happens. People are like, what do I do? Where's the documentation? So this client here, this particular client, they suffered a ransomware attack. This was back in 2021. So if you recall, it was the Kessia supply chain ransomware attack. And they came to us as a client looking for DR needs, but you could tell right up front, they were unorganized and never tested. We would reach out quarterly saying, it's time to schedule a test, but it was silent. So when they were struck with this ransomware attack, they came to us and said, hey, we need to recover. And we did have some of their data. So they were using some replication services. They had some AIX replication. They had some backup sitting on a Unitrends appliance, and they were using Zerto for some continuous data protection of their x86 environment. But that was all dissorted, and there was no plan in place. And then to add on top of that, this client had lots of turnover with upper management and at the engineering level. So the new management was not familiar with what services they had and what the plan was. So we were able to recover some of the data, but it proved that it wasn't enough to get them back up online quickly. And they ended up spending about 4 weeks piecing things back together. They had to hire a forensics company to help them sanitize systems and travel back and forth between data centers and working remote just to bring their systems back online. But to share with you a success story, and if you look at the cabling job in this picture, you can tell like this company had a plan in place. Somebody had a plan here with their cabling job. But this client with us, they're leveraging our fully managed recovery services. Now you don't have to do that. Obviously, you can always run it yourself or run in an assisted fashion. They just happen to be running a fully managed recovery. And so, they benefited from frequent quarterly testing. So what happened here was they only suffered a single system outage, but it was a critical database system. And we had just finished a quarterly validation test a month prior. So the RPS team was very familiar with the plan. It was fresh in our minds. And when they called us and said, hey, we need to declare, but it's only a single system, it's not the entire data center. We were able to adjust to that plan. So we call that down here. A good plan can be adapted to the unplanned. And when you do have a good plan in place, and then things don't go as you would expect, as they never do, you're able to adjust and still be successful. So we were able to recover just the single system, adjust the plan to meet the networking requirements because they weren't able to stretch their networks. We had to create a new network for them, and still bring everything back online within their recovery time objective.
Hey, Jeff, I might be stealing some thunder for later, but just for the audience too, to understand like our capabilities, and we're not always 100% responsible for our customers' failures, and we're not always responsible for their success because we have varying different degrees of how we engage with clients. So our contracts can range from where we just, as Jeff likes to say, warm up the coffee. We'll turn on the infrastructure for you, right? And it's a minimal contract, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for the management and execution of the recovery, all the way to on the other side of the spectrum, where it's a white glove service. We've automated everything. We set up the run books. We're responsible for the testing and the success. So, and everything in between. I think the one thing that we have is flexibility inside of, and customization are probably the two key words for how we engage with our clients.
Yeah,
anything?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we're flexible in the sense that, we can just do co-location services. We can provide assisted recovery. We could just keep the coffee warm for you, or we can provide you with a fully managed recovery service where you can kind of sit back and we'll run the recovery scenarios, and then a true declaration. We'll handle the recovery for you.
Yep. So that's all done in Maryland out of one or two facilities that are kind of our flagship facilities in Germantown or remotely. So I just thought that was worth mentioning. Probably should have set that up at the beginning. Sorry, Jeff. I'll let you get back to it.
Actually, Matt, why don't you tell me what is some of the secrets to our success here?
So, I'll take the first one, Jeff, and then I'll pass it back to you, or you can add some color and content. But this has been an interesting conversation because we engage with a lot of clients that and people outside of IT that are looking at an overall, business impact analysis, trying to make sure that the enterprise can react, and IT is just a part of that BIA. And most people in this space are familiar with what that is. The challenge with a BIA is that it usually is an IT budget or is a small part of IT budget. The decision makers are all outside of IT. You have all the different risks and opinions of different internal pockets of the business that are worried about specific risks. For us, right? And for us, I mean the audience inside of IT, we're not really worried about everything outside, right? We just want to make sure that we're able to pull up the applications that they're available, that we have the infrastructure and the network connectivity. So there's a reduced BIA that we can provide called an SIA, and it's a system impact analysis. And our system impact analysis really, has two outputs for our clients. One of them is a system overview, and that helps identify the key, contacts responsible for the system, the functions of the system, how long it can be offline, dependencies, and all that's done through an interview process and put onto a form. Then from that form, we take, and there could be 50, 100, 150, 200, however many systems you want to review. We take those notes and we upload them into an Excel spreadsheet that we call the critical applications and services list, which stack lists the applications, the infrastructure, the connectivity, and essentially gives you the ability to change, right, where the RPO, whether they're a tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. We have a next slide where they kind of lays that out and shows where they fit. But when we're working with the businesses and helping our IT partners understand the costs or go back to the business and justify the spend, obviously we're not providing any sort of revenue stream for the business, so that's out, but we're mitigating risk And then sometimes we can reduce risk, actually more, and reduce costs. So we're mitigating the risk, reducing that, and then we're reducing cost as well. And people are like, well, that doesn't make sense, right? How are we going to reduce cost? If we look at all things considered, a lot of times we see organizations overprotecting, right? So they're protecting too many applications. Now, whether or not they can actually recover is a separate conversation, but their intent is to have a whole bunch of tier 0 applications where, maybe half of those could move down to a tier 1 and have a longer RTO, which reduces cost. So I think, yeah, Jeff, that's a good jumping off point to this one. And another kind of comical, description in the bottom left here. Our recovery plan is whenever, right? So if you go through the right steps, you identify what's important, we can help stack rank those for you and then protect them accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Stack and rank. So you stack them, you show the dependencies, and then you rank those applications against, what is critical to your business. And the pyramid we have here kind of will show you a high level price structure based on your requirements for recovery for those applications. Something that's very critical to the business, where you can only lose maybe 15 minutes of data and you need to bring it back online in less than 4 hours, is going to be much more expensive versus something that you can withstand 24 plus hours of data loss, and it could take you a week to recover. So there's no need to spend the extra money on that tier 3 type application. So this pyramid kind of helps you to see, once you've done a business impact analysis or systems impact analysis, you can map that to the tiering, and then you can begin to formulate a budget and make sure that that's going to align with the business expectations. All right, so we've actually covered a good bit of ground here. Next thing we're going to talk about is creating some strategies that work for you. So just at a high level, talking about Recovery Point a bit, we are at 100% onshore support for you. We have been part of thousands of DR tests, as Matt talked about it earlier. And we provide those assisted versus fully managed recovery services. And along those lines, we also, for scalability purposes and to reduce the level of error and improve your recovery time objectives, we can provide automation and orchestration on top of the recovery part as part of the fully managed recovery service. So we'll talk a little bit about when you're designing a DR strategy. A good place to start is defining what you're protecting against. So some things you can look at here would be, well, when protecting against customer dissatisfaction, lost sales, not being fined, employee burnout is a very real thing. So at a high level, you're protecting your business to ensure that you have continuity during a disaster recovery event. But when you look at the human aspect of things, a lot of shops have IT heroes that are running around all the time trying to put out fires. And, that's not scalable. And those tactics can only last for so long. Employee burnout is real, and it has long-lasting effects after your DR event has passed. So, these are things that you might not think about, but are very real and important and very impactful to your business. So by having a good plan, by being in alignment, you can avoid many of these things and keep your good employees. But there's other things, like you need to decide, as far past these types of high level things, what are the particular things you need to focus on that you're going to design DR plans for? And, one of my favorites is designing a plan to try and avoid the fiber seeking backhoe down there in the bottom right. Those things do like to find the fiber cables and cut them. We see that frequently in the data center business. But when you look at this slide, you can see, traditionally you're protecting against those fiber cuts, fires, hurricanes, and floods. But on the left-hand side, you're now protecting, and this is really the number one disaster recovery event today. We see it growing rapidly, and that's the cyber events. If you see something like this on your screen, you are in trouble. You are being impacted. If you see this type of message, your network's encrypted, downloaded, all your data is encrypted. Pay us to prevent data leakage and to return your business to normal. And each one of these scenarios requires a different kind of planning and approach. Another part of that is further defining more of the scenario type situations. So you have business continuity, disaster recovery, and operational recovery. We have lots of acronyms in IT, and this just continues. But for business continuity, it's really things are normal. They run as normal. You may have an event, but you have an active setup, and your end users continue to work, and there's no knowledge of an event from the outside. But in a disaster recovery event, you will have some type of outage. You may have to move your data sets to an alternate site or to a new system. And then operational recovery, that's really more your traditional. I'm in the data center. I've got multi-pathing set up on my systems, MPIO, to my storage fabrics. I've got an A side, B side PDU in my rack. So, you can sustain some type of failure and just continue on as normal. But this goes back to your business expectations. And it's critical to have these things clearly defined. And at a minimum, you should know the differences and be able to educate your folks, your CIOs in your organization. But once you have, you're in alignment with your business, you have your plan in place, and your technology is in place for those tiers to meet those requirements. What's next? Matt, what's next? You start to test, right? You need to test.
Yeah, that's right.
You need to test this plan. So we're looking at risk mitigation here. And what we show you here is a test that occurs every 12 months. So as the months go by, your risk goes up. Changes the environment are occurring. You hit that 12-month mark, you've dusted off the DR plan, and you test. You find the gaps in your plan, the errors, the missing pieces, and you fix those things. But that's a Polaroid snapshot in time. You put that playbook away, and then another 12 months goes by, and that risk level goes up. So how can you avoid that? One way we recommend is to perform quarterly testing, to increase your frequency of testing. So that's going to reset your risk factor, say, every 3 months versus every 12 months. That's going to really greatly reduce your risk factor. You're going to catch those changes in your environment. But how do you scale that? How can you have your operations teams handle this kind of testing cycle? It's very difficult. A lot of businesses really don't have the bandwidth to do that. That's where automation comes into play. Once you apply automation to your DR testing cycles, you reduce that actual rise in risk over time because you're reducing the human inputs. But you also catch things early on in the test cycles. So processes are going to happen automatically. You have less reliance on someone remembering to do some task. And then you can incorporate better reporting and better capturing of the errors in your plan. Things are going to happen over time. In technology, it happens really quickly. So the threat landscape changes rapidly on everybody. And there's always shifts in technology. What you may have had a year ago in your data center, you might not have 12 months from now. And sometimes those plans don't go the way you expect them to. And we're not even talking about a DR event. We're just talking about rolling out some new technology. But you have to keep the DR side of things in mind at all times and make sure that the disaster recovery plan is adjusted to meet the needs of the business as things shift over time.
Hey, Jeff, go back one slide real quick. I want to make a comment. Yeah, something. So when we look at this, it depicts kind of a smooth increase in risk. In reality, the day after a test, you could have an admin move a bunch of VMs or make changes, and you could disconnect your backups. You might not be able to control, to ensure that you have VMs in your DR environment that match to production. And so without automation, the day after you perform a test, anything could happen. It's the wild west until you test again and reset, because there's no monitoring or alerting. So that's why I really like the automation platform that we built, and we can give you more history offline if you're interested in it. It was something that we used internally a long time ago and acquired the software and have been developing it specific to meet our customers' use case. But you could arguably make the DR test wouldn't be for the technology, it would be for the people and the processes, right? More than the technology. And this could be a flat line across, this graph. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting. This really depicts, though, what we're trying to communicate is that testing is the most important thing you can do. Second to testing is doing some sort of automation with monitoring, alerting around your applications.
Thanks, Matt. So if you're going to automate, and you can leverage Recovery Point's fully managed recovery services. So just to kind of show you a quick screen of what that looks like, this is some of the tooling we would use to input your systems, and develop the disaster recovery plan. A DR plan is really a living document, and a lot of people might have the things in spreadsheets or, just all over a SaaS platform out there today. And you really need to have some type of centralized tooling to keep all platforms in sync, and to be able to properly report on your recovery environment. So with a tooling like this, we're able to load your systems, set up the application tiering, set up the service level agreements on the recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives, and then create runbooks, which are really the automation behind it to cycle through those processes without the human factor. And then that just creates an environment for you to easily schedule environment tests and then provide the reporting to management and to the business that needs to see that you're meeting the expectations. All right, the last piece we really want to talk about here is ransomware and the cybersecurity events. It's really the number one thing that threat that to organizations today. We are seeing a definite uptick just in our own services against recovering clients that are suffering from ransomware attacks. So this is a particularly important aspect to talk about here. And there's some special considerations that need to be taken into account. When you get hit with a ransomware event, you may have to contact the authorities. You may have to bring in local authorities or really FBI. To plan for these types of events, you need to plan for an offsite or secondary location because your data center may be a crime scene. It may be shut down for the forensics analysis. So the planning you have to think about here is the before, during, and after. Most organizations don't understand the nature and scope of a ransomware attack. So it's going to lead to an inadequate response when that event happens. Matt, I was talking to a cyber defense company back in March, and they said that the ransomware was at the highest levels they've seen in the last 3 years. That was in this past February. And that the ransomware markets have matured to a point where there's actually a help desk. Or you can go to, I think it's called RAS, Ransomware as a Service now. So if you want to launch a ransomware attack, there's as a service technologies out there that you can pay for and just go at it.
Yeah, the scarier thing is like the articles you're seeing now around AI, right, and how that's going to change the landscape for cyber attacks. So a lot of interesting stuff. It showed up. I'm going to botch the actual name of the survey, but this was the number one concern still, and I don't remember how many years, but this remains the number one concern for IT professionals. And of course, obviously, business continuity comes into that pretty heavily.
It does. And really, so a modern backup infrastructure, disaster recovery, it's not a ransomware prevention solution, right? We are the last line of defense to the cybersecurity strategy. So at a minimum, you would want on-prem and in your public cloud data sets to build in these types of solutions. Some things here you want to build in isolated recovery capabilities. You want to have immutability of your data sets. Immutability could even mean actual air gapping of your data sets to avoid like a physical theft or damage. Instant recovery capabilities. And obviously you want up front on the primary side, you want ransomware detection capabilities, some MDR, EDR type solution. And then automated data restoration. So back to the automation, it's going to help you get your business back online quickly. I put a link on this slide for CrowdStrike. I found a white paper that I thought was really good by them. It's around incident response planning. So when you have the time, go seek that out if you'd like. But they talk about what to do immediately after an attack, like your legal requirements, response planning, developing a cybersecurity risk program. Since I'm DR focused, though, Matt, I like the section that's talking about train like you fight, and it was really getting into your IR readiness, which it offers great benefits to becoming operationally ready for when you have a data breach. And so, like I said, we're the last line of defense, really, to a cyber event. If you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework here, identify, protect, and detect. Those are going to be on your primary side, on your data center side. So identify your systems, run a BIA and SIA to know what systems you have, what assets you have, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, and then protect those assets. So set up a line of defense like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne, an EDR solution. And that's going to help you with the detection and the response to those events. They'll be able to see the indicator of compromise and maybe stop the event before it gets too far. But what we've seen just recently in the last couple of months is sometimes it doesn't work. It's not set up properly and you get wiped out. We had a client that actually was totally encrypted and all of their backups were wiped out. And the only thing that saved them was they had an immutable copy with us at our data center. And that's where we come in. Recovery Point is the fifth spot here. Is when you are truly down, your data center's offline, it's totally encrypted. There's nothing you can do. You're going to need a secondary site to recover to. You're going to need some type of clean room because most likely your systems, they might not be encrypted, but they're infected. And so you need to bring them online, run forensics analysis, and run some type of sanitizing process to cleanse the system before you can restore the data back to production. So recovering from a cyber event it's not easy, and it's going to take you more time than you may anticipate.
Jeff, that example you just gave, that wasn't a hypothetical. That was an actual recovery where we had backups that were infected but not encrypted, right? And you were able to move that data to a clean room, extract any viruses, and then present them back a clean copy of their backups, right?
That was a true story. Yeah, that was just a few months ago. Like I said, we're seeing an uptick in these types of events where they attack the cyber event, cybersecurity breach attacks the backups first. They take out your recovery methods and then they launch the encryption attack. So there's not much you can do. Maybe you have a snapshot on-prem, but you do have your last line of defense with your backups that were sitting at Recovery Point. And we can stand up these isolated environments. You even have to look at a point where you need multiple isolated environments and different restore points to piece the data back together. And we can help you with that kind of scenario.
Hey, real quick, Jeff, there were two questions I'll go to. I'm going to drop this CrowdStrike link in the chat right now. The other one was, how do you ensure your backups are protected from ransomware on an ongoing basis? So I think you somewhat hit on that when you mentioned immutable. I know the next slide talks about tape, so maybe that's a good opportunity to kind of bring in that air gap discussion.
Sure. I'll jump to this best practice slide to wrap it up here, really. And then we can go to some Q&A, but best practices here are 32110. And that is keep 3 copies of data, keep the copies of data on 2 different types of media, keep one on disk, keep a snapshot, keep one on maybe an immutable object storage or even on tape, keep a copy off-site, and then keep one air-gapped. And again, that could be an immutable copy off-site in the cloud or with Recovery Point. We have object storage. We can provide actual physical tape and tape vaulting services. And then the last thing here is 0, and that is 0 errors. And that gets into your testing again. Test that your backups are good, that you can recover from them, that your plan works. And when you find the errors or the gaps, go ahead, let's fix those things. Find out where you might be missing some strengths in subject areas for technologies, and you could go get your operations teams trained up. But Matt, I think to address that question, maybe a little bit more to the point, is there's a couple ways you can do that to scan for backup. So most data mover technologies today, Veeams, Commvault, they have capabilities to scan those backups for malware. Some are better than others, but they all can do it today. In addition to that, you can instant mount your backups and actually run scans against the actual system as it would look if you've recovered it. And then again, just run through test cycles, incorporate this type of cybersecurity strategy to scan and look for the anomalies.
So it really sounds, Jeff, like there's three things you mentioned, right? It's scanning, looking for those anomalies as you're sending them to your backups, making sure your backups are immutable, right? And then lastly, potentially even air gapping. So taking those backups, putting them to tape, and then having us auto eject the tapes. And I mean,
Vault, put them in a vault.
At least have all your data, right? And it's funny too. Tape's been an interesting topic, and I've met a lot of people that love tape. You remember back in, it was probably 10 years ago now, EMC came out with the tape sucks bumper stickers. Everybody had them on their laptops. I don't know if you guys remember those in the DNX days, but it turns out that tape actually doesn't suck, and tape's been growing at like a 7% CAGR year over year, and that's anticipated to continue into the future. So we've invested in tape vaulting. We can have a backup of any kind in our data center that you can point to, and then of course we can take one more step to air gap it, which it's just additional security. Obviously, it can increase your recovery time objective, but better to have the data than not, right, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Matt. I think we can open it up to some Q&A now.
Perfect. Looks like a couple came in. Hold on, let me go down to them. It's on the screen. So, let's see. Recording, will it be available? Yes, it will be. I don't know how that goes out exactly. Maybe one of our folks, Megan, who set this up, can share where that's available. I believe it'll go out to everybody that joined. And then there's another question. Are there best practices when recovering from the public cloud specifically? I'll let you take that one, Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. Yes. So, if you look at some Gartner guidance on that, really the approach is to keep it in the cloud. So, and really that's a good approach anyways, is to keep things simple. Don't add complexity to the environment. So say you're running some services out in Azure or AWS, you can leverage the native primitives that they offer to run backups, but they're lacking in reporting and scalability. So you can look at, what third-party technologies like Veeam for AWS or Veeam for Azure, where they could give you better insights into your systems that you have out there in the cloud sector, and give you like a single screen to be able to see all of the systems, whether they're on-prem or out in the cloud. Data sovereignty, you might want to keep those systems in a certain region, or maybe inside of the US. Sometimes those data sets, if there's a misconfiguration, you can replicate those out of region where you might not want to keep them. So yeah, keep it simple and plan for recoveries inside the cloud environment.
Perfect. Yeah, we'd of course love to back up everything and tell you that everything should move to us, but we realize that we want what's best for your data, and ultimately a clean recovery is part of that. So it's hard in the multi-cloud, hybrid cloud world. I know that on our roadmap, especially around automated recovery, it's important to us that we continue to develop ways that you can monitor and be alerted, even if the data doesn't live on-prem with Recovery Point. That's probably a future webinar idea for us. But we'd love to hear your feedback, right? If there's things that you guys are looking for or challenges, we learn the most from our clients. And if there's no other questions, Jeff, I think we can call that a wrap. Just one more question around monitoring capabilities. So we hit on that slide you had with BPR from a monitoring perspective. Do you want to talk about that SaaS application?
Sure. So in reference to what we offer with a fully managed recovery service is proactive monitoring on your data mover technology. So we can look at the DR plan through BPR Manager, the tooling set, and then we can compare that to what is actually being replicated, backups and replications, and then we can alert on differentials to that. So discrepancies. Maybe some systems have been decommissioned and new systems added, but they weren't added into the DR plan, or nothing new has been replicated. We can detect those anomalies and alert. We also look at those SLAs, recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives. So if your replication technology is falling behind by, say, 24 hours, we can alert. We can say, hey, you are behind by a day with this critical system?
Perfect. Love it. Guys, we finished with 15 minutes left. Thank you again for joining. If there's any questions, you can click one more slide, Jeff. I think it has our emails on that last one. Really straightforward. It's M. Kramer at Recovery Point or J. Judy at Recovery Point. If you have any questions, if they're technical, please reach out to Jeff. If they're about connecting with the sales rep or partnering, I see a couple partners. I see a lot of clients joined us today. Please feel free to reach out to me. But we're here to help, and appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.